Roberto, welcome to the Basketball Performance Podcast. Thanks for your time.
Hey, Will, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with you to share some of my experience with you guys.
Cool. Well, I'm super excited. Let's dive on in. But before we go in, can you just give us a brief background about yourself, where you're from, how you got to the place where you're in now? Were you in terms of an athlete? Were you a basketball player? Just give us a brief background about that.
I'm 36 years old now, and I've been a basketball strength coach for the past 14 years. So basically, this was my first and only job of my life. And I lived in 17 cities. Brescia now in Italy is number 17. I started my career 14 years ago in Rome, where I spent 7 years with Stella Azzurra, which is one of the main youth programs in Europe. After that, I moved to Verona for one season, working for a second division team. Then after that, I moved to Torino for 2 more years. And then I had the huge opportunity to join Hapoel Jerusalem, which is a professional club based in Jerusalem, Israel. One of the top clubs in Europe. And I spent there 3 seasons. And those 3 seasons were amazing. I got the amazing opportunity to work with some of the best athletes in the world. Just to give you an example, I had the huge opportunity to work with Amari Stoudemire for 1 year when he was still playing, and that was something incredible. And this year, my wife and I decided to come back to Italy after our daughter was born last year in Jerusalem. And now I joined Brescia, which is one of the best teams in Italy right now, that plays in first division. So long story short, this is my background.
Okay, and in your teenage years or your youth, did you grow up playing basketball?
No. Actually, I grew up being a baseball player. I'm actually still playing baseball.
Oh.
Yeah. Not professional, of course. I play in second division here in Italy, which is a semi-professional league. Still playing, still having fun, and I've been playing baseball since I was 5. So basically, all my life.
Really cool. So as a strength and conditioning coach, you never know what opportunities are thrown your way. And so it just happens that you had an awesome opportunity in a sport like basketball, where in the beginning, you may not have been too familiar. Can you talk a little bit about, as a strength coach, going into a sport that you don't know much about? So say, for example, if I'm going into maybe volleyball or soccer or something I'm not extremely familiar about, what are the first steps that a strength coach can take to kind of familiarize themselves and get acquainted with the sport that they're about to go into?
Fortunately, I was pretty familiar with basketball because even though I didn't grow up being a basketball player, but I grew up being a huge basketball fan. Okay. So I was always going to games with my dad, and so basketball was part of my life for sure. Of course, I wasn't aware of what was going on in the gym during the week. So the first step was to ask as many questions as possible to other strength coaches, for example, or to other coaches, just to get an idea of what a basketball practice was like. And that was the first step. And this is definitely something that I always recommend to young coaches. Just ask questions. If you're not familiar with something, if you're not familiar with an environment, go and ask questions to people that have more experience than you. And basically that was what I did. And of course, I tried to study as much as possible, like reading books, listening. 14 years ago, there weren't a lot of podcasts, but still, you had the chance to find something on the internet, something interesting on the internet, just to have to improve your knowledge,
Yeah, definitely. And we'll jump into the basketball part now. So I'm really excited. This is one of my passions, obviously, you can tell. But when talking to another strength coach, one of the things that I always want to know is their philosophy and how they break down the game. How would you go about dissecting the game of basketball in terms of the core movements that you'll need, that you'll see on the court, regardless of whether it's defense or offense?
Yeah, in basketball, of course, we have some feature movements that are accelerations, decelerations, lateral movements, crossover steps, jumps, landing on 1 foot, landing on 2 feet. So all these movements are part of basketball. And of course, when you work out with athletes, you need to break these movements down, even in the weight room. And also on the court when you do warm-up drills or when you do agility drills. So as I said before, a lot of acceleration and deceleration with accelerations and decelerations, which are, to me, the core movements of basketball. A lot of change of direction, which again is a very, very important part of basketball. And even though a lot of people think that jump is one of the main features for basketball players, it's not. It's not, because you can actually jump like probably 5 centimeters and still be an elite player if your acceleration and deceleration and ability to change direction and to react to what happens on the court is at the highest level.
Nice, cool. Here's a weird question, since because I'm just curious about what your thoughts on this. How would you define the word jump? So for me, the way that I define the word jump is that you jump off of 2 feet and land on 2 feet. So rather, a hop is, say, for example, I'm going to jump off my left and land on my left. A leap or a bound, depending on the vocabulary, is when I jump on my left and land on my right. A drop could be that I'm jumping off my 2 and landing on 1. So for you, how do you define, like when you say that jumping is not one of the big characteristics of basketball? Can you define what you mean by that? Like, what's your definition of that word?
No, I was just saying that, when you think about basketball, you think about crazy dunks or 360 dunks and stuff like that. I said jump, but that's what I meant. You don't have to dunk 360 or to dunk under your legs.
Right.
Player,
anything airborne
characteristics. You can still shoot the ball very well, or you can still be an elite defender, or let's say, I don't know, let's go to the NBA, okay, for example. One of the best athletes, one of the best players is James Harden. James Harden doesn't really jump high. He can dunk, of course, he dunks, but he's not a leaper. But still, one of the best players in the world at accelerating and decelerating.
For sure.
One of the best players in the world.
For sure. And those are key attributes. So going on to that movement piece, Roberto, one of the things that really caught my attention, and I love how you break this down, is can you talk a little bit about the movements of defense? But then what are other attributes? Because as a strength and conditioning coach, not only do we look at the movements, but what are if you can kind of touch on this, like the mental characteristics of what make up a good defender? So movement and mental characteristics.
First of all, playing defense is hard. Everybody knows it. All the coaches know that playing defense is tough, and also all the players know it. And one of the main things on defense is being able to have effective closeouts. And that's the hardest part, because when you do most of the time when you have a closeout, especially a tough one, you're playing on the weak side. And players that play on the weak side tend to relax a little bit, stay high on their legs, and maybe also tend to lose some focus when they play on defense. So that's the mental aspect of playing defense. You need to be focused for the whole time. For 24 seconds, you need to be focused. You cannot lose your focus. And one of the main movements, as I said before, on defense is closeout. I like to work a lot on closeouts with my athletes, especially during the preseason and then during my warm-ups. I like to design drills that address to that specific topic. And I also like to partner up with the assistant coaches to create drills together, because most of the time when I do closeout drills with my athletes, I don't like to use the basketball a lot, or either because I like to focus on other aspects of the movement, and also because I'm not a basketball coach, so I'm not that confident using that tool on the court with my athletes. So I want the assistant coach, or eventually, or also the head coach, to help me out with them, and to build drills together. So for example, I can have a drill where one of my athletes sprints and does a closeout, and right after that slides back, or has a crossover step and then a slide, or whatever I have in mind on that specific day. And then right after it, I have my coach doing an actual closeout with the basketball, okay? With the defensive players, recovering, and then playing one-on-one with against his teammate.
Mm-hmm. Cool, nice. So one of the things I was going to ask you, which you kind of answered, but let's see if we can go into a little bit more depth. So we have our movement skills. That could be your shuffle. That could be your crossover step. That could be closing out. I'm sure there's a host of other different movements for basketball. But how do you combine the reactional component into working and fine-tuning the mechanics of the movements?
First off, you need to work on the mechanics. If you don't have that, you cannot work on other aspects. Of course, mm-hmm. You cannot work on reaction if your mechanics is poor. Mm-hmm. Once you own it, you can start working on reaction. So first, I like to do simple stuff, like for example, pointing a direction, and then I can mix it out with maybe some other cues, like saying, okay, go right or left. And then I can have another teammate just dribbling the ball left to right after the closeout, so the defensive player can react. And after this, we can play a one-on-one, an actual one-on-one. Okay. Mm-hmm. I want the athlete always to react to the most specific situation as possible.
Right. No, it makes complete sense. And then from there, how would you then determine whether that skill has transferred into the game or into practice when it comes to 5-on-5? Because I guess that's the black box. That's the secret sauce of what we're always looking for as strength coaches, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's simple. Just watch the practice, rewatch the video, the tape of the practice with your coaches, and rewatch the game. And you can see a lot of different situations on the game, and you can definitely analyze if those closeouts were effective or not during the game and also during practice. It's very simple.
Right. Okay. What are some of the overlooked components that first basketball players may overlook in your experience when it comes to the physical aspect of what we do? And then maybe what are some of the things that us as coaches overlook when it comes to basketball players, because they may not be built the same way as other athletes, right? So first of all, what do you think players themselves maybe overlook a little bit when it comes to physical preparation?
Two things: sleep and nutrition.
Okay. Most
of them overlook the importance of sleep. Most of them sleep like maybe 5 or 6 hours a night, mm-hmm. even though they practice hard during the day. They don't see sleeping as that important. While we all know that it's crucial to recovery, it's crucial to performance. So that's number one. Number two, as I said before, is nutrition. Most of the athletes, especially young athletes, think that they can eat junk food for the rest of their career and still perform at the highest level. And this is a hard lesson that they learn usually when they get older. When they get older than 30, they start to realize that if they don't fuel their body with good food, good quality food, they cannot perform at the same level anymore. So those are two important aspects that most of the time get overlooked by athletes.
Sure. Love that. Sorry, go ahead.
And as far as coaches, I think one very important aspect that most of the time coaches overlook is communication with the athletes. Most of the time, a lot of coaches don't really have a good communication, and don't really have good conversations with their athletes. Don't have genuine conversations with the athletes. They don't realize there's just having a genuine conversation, just asking, hey, how are you doing today, can go a long way with getting the buy-in of their athlete on that specific day and eventually on that specific season. So that's
Right.
another very important aspect that we tend to overlook sometimes.
Okay, we're going to come back to buy-in in a little bit because that's obviously one of the most important components. But when looking at the nutrition piece, do you guys do anything in terms of like pre-game, or let's call it pre-practice or post-practice, in terms of making sure that they're well fueled?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we have a dietitian on our staff, so he takes care of all the nutrition aspect. But we have usually we give the players some energy gel or energy bars before practice and before games. We make sure that they drink a recovery shake right after practice and right after games. And starting from this year here in Brescia, we also have lunch right after practice. We serve lunch for all the players after practice because we practice at 12. We always practice at noon every single day. By 2/2:30, the practice is over. Players get their recovery shake, get a shower, get some treatment, and by 3, they are in the players' lounge having lunch, and it's provided by the team, which is huge. I think not a lot of professional teams do that, and I think it's a crucial component.
Okay, great. So talking a little bit about periodization, obviously conditioning is a large part of the game. How do you prepare or periodize your energy system development or conditioning throughout the phase of a year, from going from off season to preseason to in season to postseason? What is your mindset really when it comes to those different phases, and what is appropriate? Obviously it differs from individual to individual, but do you have kind of like a foundational philosophy of how you go about things?
Yeah. Let's say, okay, let's start with off season. We touch on the aerobic aspect of the conditioning, especially because I don't want to tax their joints, their tendons, and their muscle during the off season. So we work on just basic aerobic endurance. And as soon as we approach the in season, I like to start using for example, some tempo runs with my athletes. So during the preseason, a lot of tempo runs, and so we start to be more specific. As long as we go, as soon as we approach the season, we tend to be always more specific. And then during the season, I don't actually work on conditioning with my athletes, but I just give recommendations to my head coach. We like to condition the athletes playing basketball, which is the best way possible. So let's say we try to plan the week according to when we play. So let's say we have a game on Sunday. We try to have on the first day of the week, which is Tuesday, we try to work mainly on half court plus 1. So we just go one transition. And then the second day of the week, which is Wednesday, we have half court plus 2. So we have 2 transitions back and forth. And then we can also play 2 games. And usually this is the hardest day of the week. Then third day, we go back to half court plus 1. And then again on Friday, we try to touch on again half court plus 2 and some games. So we use a high-low approach. And then the last game, which is the game the day before the game, it's an easy day. We tend to stay half court, and usually practice is really, really short, never more than 60 minutes long. So This is how we condition our athletes throughout the season, basically. Just playing the game of basketball and just, let's say, tweaking how many times they run up and down the court and how much time the head coach talks during drills and stuff like that. but never without the ball. We don't like that.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like since you're able to use something like a high-low approach, you really got some good buy-in from your staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely lucky. Yeah, my head coach really takes into consideration what I say every day. So it's something that not all the strength coaches have, and it's definitely something that I don't have to take for granted because it's not always like that.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely lucky.
Definitely. And I want to go back and touch into the buy-in piece. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's interesting because you work at a level that is, you're working with all grown-ups for the most part, right? You're working with grown men. So, and those grown men have obviously had some success in life, which is why they're where they are today. So can you talk us a little bit about the buy-in piece, especially you mentioned a couple names of guys who play in the NBA. How do you go about developing relationships with them? How do you go about developing a sense of safety and a sense of them knowing that you care what's best for them? How do you go about doing that at your level, especially?
So, first of all, the athletes need to know that you are there for them. Okay, they need to know that no matter what time, no matter what day, you're there for them. If they need you, you're there for them. If they want to work out like early in the morning or late at night, you're there for them. They need to know that. They need to feel confident talking to you. They need to feel confident asking you to work out with them. And this is number one. Second one, they need to know that, of course, you know your stuff. If they get a feeling of you not knowing what you're talking about, you're done. You're done for them. There's no way to obtain that buy-in. So you have there are a lot of things that you can do in order to get them to know that you know what you're talking about. So let's say, for example, whenever you're on the road, I recommend you to read books instead of scrolling your cell phone. If your athletes see that you're reading a book, especially if that book is a strength and conditioning book, they know that you're studying. They know that you're trying to level up your game, and that's important. And another thing, for example, is to ask them, ask the players, ask questions to the players. Let's say, for example, I have this program in mind for you. What do you think about it? So involve them into the decision making of their own program, and or I don't know, asking them, what's your favorite exercise? Why not? Especially if I'm working with an experienced athlete, I always ask them, what's your favorite exercise? Because maybe they've been doing squat for the past 20 years of their career. So why should I take away squat from their program? And that's another way to obtain their buy-in. And what else? Asking questions first thing in the morning. As I said before, just hey Will, how are you doing today? Is everything okay at home? Or how did you sleep last night? How do you feel after yesterday's practice? These are all things that most of the coaches don't do, but they can definitely go a long way with obtaining the buy-in of your players.
Cool. In terms of, because a part of our job is, I believe it's not only physical, but I believe that's a mental side as well, right? And I think that there's a lot of room for us as strength coaches to be able to teach the mental side in terms of mental toughness. Now, there's a fine line between pushing the athlete really, really hard, and that certain approach doesn't correspond to the research that science might show you, if that makes sense. So at that same time, how do you go about training mental toughness, even though some of it doesn't correspond with the latest research, say, for example? Do you believe in doing that? I'm not saying that you have to do it every single time, but every now and then, maybe during the off season, you throw in one of these very, very hard, maybe it's a lactic session or an oxidative session. How do you go about training that mental toughness side?
So if we're talking about a team environment, like to work on the mental aspect, on mental toughness, especially during the preseason, okay? Where we can have, as I said before, whenever we have some tempo runs, some lactic work, that's where you're creating mental toughness, okay? And maybe we're trying to do the same thing playing basketball with the head coach. So with all the recommendations that I give him, we try to build and create mental toughness through basketball also. But that's part of the preseason. When we're talking about in season, you don't really work as I'm talking about strength coaches on mental toughness with experienced players. You don't need to. They're tough enough. That's their job, and they're experienced enough to know that they have to be tough mentally. You can work on mental toughness with younger athletes, especially with those that don't get a lot of minutes on the court. And that's actually something that you have to do, because most of the time they tend to get frustrated because they don't get a lot of minutes, playing minutes, and they need to work. They need to do some extra work in order to be in shape and to be conditioned, and that's really tough. That's really tough because frustration doesn't always allow you to work hard, and you need to be definitely mentally strong and mentally tough to keep working and keep grinding, and to make sure that you are ready when your name gets called up. So again, I like to work a lot of mental toughness with my workouts, with my conditioning drills, especially with those young athletes. During the off season, it depends. It depends on who is your client. If you're working with private clients, and you always have to understand what's the situation, because sometimes you have an athlete that is highly motivated, so you don't really have to touch on mental toughness with him. He's already tough, Or sometimes you have a client asking you, actually, man, I need to be more tough. So do whatever you want with me. I need to get tougher. And you know that with that athlete, you can and you actually have to push harder, because he's the one who's asking you to be tough with.
Yeah. And going into that mental toughness component, obviously some of it doesn't correspond to this to the latest researches of science, but obviously the majority of what we do should correspond to the latest researches and data and analytics and all that. Is there kind of any training workload management that you do with the players throughout the season, like training readiness? Is there anything that you do, say RPE, heart rate variability, omega, like, what do you really look at to make sure that you kind of, because to me, I feel like the eye of the coach is very important, but we always like to back that up maybe with a little bit of data. Is there anything that you do in terms of workload management throughout the season to make sure that your athletes are ready to go?
The eye of the coach is very important, as you said, but I keep track of RPE after every session. I actually calculate the session RPE, and take a look also at the acute chronic workload ratio, even though it's not perfect, but it gives you an idea of what's going on that specific week compared to the 3 weeks before that. So that's something that I look at. And I also, as I already mentioned it before, I always ask 3 things to all my athletes. I send them a questionnaire every morning. We have an app. I use Team Builder. So I send them every morning this questionnaire where I ask them your mood. Just give a number to your mood from 1 to 5. Give a number to your sleep quality, and give a number to your muscle soreness. So combining these 3 numbers and with the RPE of that specific day, I get a good idea of where my players is on that specific day.
Yeah, really good. Really, really good. That's obviously something that's very important for us as physical preparation coaches to know where our athletes are that particular day. Thank you. You've been so generous with your time. I don't want to take up too much more of it. The last couple questions is, so say you're coming to the end of your career and you're looking back and it's been great, what is a lasting impression what is a mark that you would like to leave before leaving the strength and conditioning industry or the basketball industry? What's a mark that you want to leave, or an impact that you would want to make?
One of the biggest thing as a strength coach is knowing that you are inspiring your athletes. Actually, one of the best messages that I've ever received from one of my athletes was last year. I had one of the American guys sending me a text message right after the season finished, and he said, "Man, you were a true inspiration to me. Keep being yourself." That was one of the best messages I could have ever received from one of my guys.
It's an amazing feeling. I know it's to have done right and to have put your all, and then your athletes appreciate it. Just a phenomenal feeling. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Please let us know, where can our listeners find you? Where's the best place that they can get in contact with you? Because you have some great stuff out there. I highly recommend our listeners learn more about you, listen to your content. Where can we find out more about you?
My website, you can go to robperformance.com, or you can go on Instagram, just type Roberto Iezzi. You can DM me. I answer to all the messages. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Or you can also take a look at my podcast, give it a listen. My podcast is called Sport Vitamins. And I also have a newsletter if you guys are interested. It's called Performance Nugget. You can find the link on my website and also my Instagram page.
Awesome. Again, I really recommend anybody listening to this. Roberto's got some awesome stuff, whether just strength and conditioning in general, or basketball strength and conditioning, or basketball movements. I get a lot of my stuff from him. So highly recommend you guys look more into it. Roberto, thank you so much for being on the show. You've been so generous with your time.
No, thank you. It was a lot of fun. So thanks for having me on your show.
Good. Just hold the line.